Hello, I'm Murray Hopper, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Freedom Party of Ontario. With me in the studio is our party leader, Robert Metz. Tell me, Bob, how does it feel to be the leader of what amounts to a brand new political party?
Well, I certainly have to say it's a unique experience, just like the product that we're trying to bring to the electorate in this and the previous two elections. We're a very different party from the existing three, as most of the people in London are already familiar. We have a totally different outlook on the role of government in society. In fact, if I were to sum up what makes us different from the other political parties, it would be that we believe that the purpose of a government in a free society is to prevent some of us from forcing our points of view and our objectives and our responsibilities upon other people against their will. Quite to the contrary, I happen to believe that the major three parties are doing exactly the opposite. Lobby groups approach them, interested parties approach them. They all want some favor at someone else's expense. And we think this is a process that just has to stop, if for no other reason than for the escalating taxes, deficits, and loss of economic and personal freedoms that we see accruing in this country today. I think we have to turn around the direction we're going in and move towards a more individually responsible society.
What are the ways in which governments interfere with our freedoms?
In so many ways, Murray. To begin with, let's look at the obvious situation of our tax rate, which is plus 50% for the average person. I mean, just think out there, if you had twice as much money available to you as you do now, how much better you would be off as an individual in meeting your own needs and not having to depend upon your neighbor or the taxpayer to meet those needs for you. Certainly, if 55% of our money that we earn is going to someone else who's spending it for us, we're really half free in the real sense of the word. We get promises from the other political parties that they're going to spend our money responsibly, but I think that's a bit of a contradiction in terms. The responsible spending of money requires the responsible earning of money. And to earn money responsibly, you can't force it out of people. You've got to offer them a service or a product that they're willing to buy willingly. And I think this is just one measure of the way we lose our freedoms. We've seen other laws in Ontario where, for example, the Peterson government plans to take away our rights to shop on Sunday once again. We're telling a store owner in this case that he doesn't own his store on a Sunday. We're denying him his fundamental property rights. How would we, as individuals in our own home, feel if the government told us, for example, we couldn't use our living rooms on a Sunday, or we couldn't use something that we own or something we've worked for on a particular day of the week simply because other people object?
The point is often made about Sunday shopping that workers might be forced to work on Sunday. How do you deal with that?
Well, here again, the word force is being inappropriately used. In the exercise of our choice, we accept the responsibilities that go along with those choices. If I'm going to work for someone whose basic industry or service requires work on a Sunday, that's something I have to consider before I sign on the dotted line to accept excuse me, work from that employer. Similarly, if, for example, I was afraid of heights, I wouldn't apply for a job in high-rise construction and expect my employer to employ me if I refused to climb the first 3 floors. This is sort of the same situation we're seeing in the Sunday shopping issue. But of course, the fundamental issue here is private property rights. Another way our property rights are being attacked, again, is by constantly taxing individuals on their homes and their properties. The average senior citizen today who had his house paid off and thought he wasn't going to have to pay any mortgage payments anymore is looking at monthly tax payments that used to look like his mortgages. Time to turn that around. We've got to say no to more taxation, yes to less government.
Thanks very much, Bob, for those remarks. You've been listening to Robert Metz, the party leader of Freedom Party of Ontario. And this is Murray Hopper saying goodbye from Freedom Party until next time. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Donna Faye Milton, and I'm here to ask David Winiger a few questions. David is the NDP candidate for London South. We'll start with an auto insurance one. David, you're an attorney. The legislation that the government has introduced, this no claims thing, limits people's right to sue. We can understand why an attorney might not like this legislation. But how would it affect someone like me if I were in a car accident?
Well, Donna, it's a very difficult situation for consumers. When we campaigned in 1987 for a no-fault insurance plan, it was one that was friendly to consumers. This plan is only friendly to the insurance companies. If you're in an accident, Donna, and you don't have a serious and permanent injury, Donna, you can't sue. All you can collect is 80% of your income up to a certain level. If, for example, you suffer mentally or emotionally as a result of a car accident, you can't collect at all. And instead of premiums coming down, the voters I talked to have had their premiums go up. So really they're trading off all their rights to sue and not getting any benefit in return.
That's true. Mine went up. You're chairman of the London and Middlesex Housing Authority. What changes would you make to ensure that reasonable supply of affordable housing is available to people?
Well, certainly, Donna, I think we need to have more cooperative and nonprofit housing. We also need to make it easier for people who are buying into the housing market for the first time to purchase houses through tax grants and concessions and loans, low-interest loans. We also have to look at the plight of the tenant. Tenants are facing outrageous increases well in excess of the statutory limits as a result of landlords passing through high financing costs and luxury renovations to tenants.
Yes.
We have to put a halt to these increases. How can people save to buy their first home if they're paying excessive rent, as much as 60–70% of their income?
I see. I understand that you were out canvassing with an environmental leaflet even before the election was called. I know the NDP has long been very concerned with the environment. Won't some of the policies that you recommend, such as fining polluters and making them clean up their own messes, won't these things result in businesses going under or jobs being lost?
I hope not, Donna, but anyone who's read the Brundtland Report certainly knows that we're facing a global environmental crisis. Our ecosystem is in peril, and certainly pollution is taking its toll, and we've overused our resources. We need to attack that immediately for the sake of our children and grandchildren. If jobs are lost through that process, then we need to implement strong programs to help workers adjust, to help workers to create jobs in conservation and in pollution cleanup. We need economic incentives to allow people to convert to more environmentally friendly employment rather than environmentally hostile jobs.
Well, that gives me a better understanding. We're all aware that the population is aging. Apparently by the year 2013, 1 out of 5 people will be seniors. I'm sure I won't qualify.
Of course not. You're ageless.
What kind of services do we need to ensure that people can age with dignity and that their incomes will be adequate to meet their needs at that time?
Yes, well, certainly our objective as a party is to ensure that seniors can age with comfort, dignity, and security. We need to tighten up the regulations in private nursing homes. We need to ensure that people aren't making profits on the backs of our seniors. We need to ensure that they're given quality health care. We need to ensure that they don't have to wait a long time for emergency services and hospital care. And furthermore, we need to ensure that they can live independently if they wish to.
Right, right. We don't have too much time. Quickly, I see by your letter here that you're concerned about the job losses as a result of the free trade agreement. Could you give us some examples?
I can give you 3 good examples: Fleck Manufacturing, Webster Manufacturing, and certainly Manchester Plastics. Employees thrown out of work, no benefits, very sad situation.
Yes.
Nothing for the future.
Hello and welcome. My name is Kathryn Plasco, and I'm here with Bob Wood, PC candidate for London South. Good afternoon, Bob. Good afternoon.
Before we discuss the issues of the election, why don't we start with a bit about your background? Can you tell us about yourself?
Yes, I was born and raised in London. I went to the University of Western Ontario. Was called to the bar 18 years ago. Was created Queen's Counsel in 1984. I'm married, have 2 daughters, and practice law here in London.
I see. And now, throughout this election campaign, taxation really seems to be the issue. What are your views on the subject?
Well, I think we've got to have a tax freeze. We've had 33 tax increases in the last 5 years, and I think that's way too many. What we propose, and Mike Harris has made it clear that this would be the firm policy of any progressive conservative government, is an immediate tax freeze followed hopefully by some tax cuts once we get the books of the province in order. To make that work, we're going to have some form of spending control, which I think should be a spending cap. And I think once we accomplish that, we can wring some of the considerable waste out of our government and get the funds allocated to what I think are our priority areas, namely education and health.
I see. And could you come back to that spending cap? What exactly does it entail?
Well, Mike Harris hasn't defined exactly how we're going to do it, but my proposal is that we should make a rule, which the Cabinet, of course, would have to enforce with all the government ministries, that government spending should not increase in any year more than the overall increase in the provincial economy.
I see. Now, another important issue that seems to be emerging is the environment. Now, how do you plan to address the various concerns?
Well, Mike Harris made the environment a major part of his platform when he ran for the leadership of the party, and that really boils down to the 4 R's: recycle, reuse, reduce, and reject. Our immediate plans are basically these. Number 1, we want to introduce a proper environmental assessment process, which we don't think we have now. The Canadian Environmental Law Association made a recommendation to the government at the government's request some 3 years ago as to how to improve the environmental assessment process. The government's left that recommendation on the shelf. We think it should be immediately implemented because we're reaching a crisis with respect, for example, to solid waste disposal in areas like metropolitan Toronto. And if we don't get a proper process in place, we're going to have an environmental disaster 5 or 10 years down the line. The second thing we'd like to do immediately is introduce a tax credit for the development of new environmental technologies. We think that can do a lot to solving our problem here in Ontario. The blue box, for example, is only the first step in a long journey. And secondly, we think that can be a major export industry to both the rest of North America and Europe.
I see. Now, one final question before we go. All governments seem to face close public scrutiny. Now, the Peterson government has had its share of ethical scandals. How do you feel about government being accountable for its actions?
Well, we feel it's very important that the Premier be able to enforce proper ethical standards on those in the Cabinet, in the caucus, and those dealing with government. We feel that the current Premier has not been able to do this, and we've seen a lot of examples of the problems that arise from his inability to do that. Mike Harris is the kind of guy who I think is going to lay the law down to all concerned and is going to deal very quickly and effectively with anybody that doesn't do the right thing. There's absolutely no reason to have the kinds of scandals and embarrassments we've had over the past few years, and I think a Premier who isn't determined to do something about it isn't going to have to take very long to get this thing cleaned up.
All right. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Wood, and thank you for joining us.
Firstly, I would like to thank all those who supported the Family Coalition Party in the last provincial election, and all new supporters. No matter what happens in our present election, you are the winners for supporting that which is right. This party is convinced that as its purpose and philosophy becomes known, more people will support the FCP. The final victory will come, which is to set Ontario on course to a healthy and well-ordered society. The Family Coalition Party is based on traditional family values, individual and social responsibilities. Its purpose is to enhance and defend the dignity of every human person, man, woman, and child, from conception to natural death. This leadership is essential. Compromising the aforementioned principles threatens the value of life and the stability of the family and of society. In our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it begins by saying, quote, "Whereas Canada is founded upon the principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. It is from God that all authority and natural law is derived, and government must respect the natural law in exercising its authority. We as Canadians have a Christian heritage, and as God is supreme, we should proudly proclaim our Lord Jesus Christ as King of our country. We all have experienced the great freedoms and joys Christianity has given us, but we are experiencing sorrows as our country slowly rejects the laws of our loving God. We must be concerned to rid ourselves of the pollutions of our society. These pollutions are of three kinds: that of the world, 2, that of the human body, and 3, that of the human soul. Concerning the world, the government must keep stricter control over all emissions in the air and in water. Incentives will be given to businesses to encourage their responsibilities to keep our environment safe. We plan to increase the use of refillable and biodegradable containers to help reduce useless waste. We want to encourage people to start new methods of waste control, energy efficiency, and self-sufficiency. We want as well to encourage the introduction of more environmentally friendly products. These measures show our concern not only for the here and now, but also for future generations. Concerning the pollution of the body, we must fight to stop alcoholism with more education on its consequences, and drug addiction with strict laws against traffickers. We must stop the practice of unethical research on human beings, particularly the harvest of the human fetus for use as spare parts. Abortion and euthanasia should be crimes punishable by the rule of law of Canada. I'm sure that if people were told the truth about abortion, given the facts, shown pictures of before and after an abortion, and the methods used, there would be no more abortions. If people ripped from animals' wombs its young and cut them to pieces, most people would be horrified. Yet when it comes to the human being, who, being made in the image and likeness of God and having an immortal soul, some people still try to defend abortion practices. The present three parties even financially support it. Maybe because our eyes cannot see in the womb, we deny a baby being there, but 9 months later, sure enough, it's a baby boy or a baby girl. We must again put mothers on a pedestal where they belong, for they share with God's great miracle of creation and forming the next generation. Concerning pollution of the soul, we must resist false freedoms such as the freedom that allows pornography, vulgarity, and blasphemy in the name of freedom of expression. We all know Sunday is the traditional day of rest and should be kept as such. Sunday shopping will not make any more money for anyone. Some full-time people will go to part-time work. Small businesses will collapse, and goods and services will increase in price because there's just X number of dollars anyone can spend. People are being overtaxed. If the government stopped financing things which are not for the common good of citizens or not government responsibility, there would be stricter laws over MPP wages and overstaffing. There would not be a need of tax increases, but there would be tax decreases. In housing, a family should be able to afford adequate housing on one income. Low-cost and long-term mortgages for housing construction for people of low and modest incomes must be made available. Rent controls should be phased out. The Family Coalition Party has 68 candidates in the present election. This party is here to stay. This is a serious party, growing in numbers. It is not only the best party, but the necessary party. On September the 6th, vote Paul Picard, your candidate for Family Coalition Party, and make history.